Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Paramita and I heartily welcome you to my channel Paramita PM. If you are new to my channel, then I would request you to go through the content of my channel, look at the videos, and if you really find those videos helpful and if they really heighten your interest, then do like it, share it, and do not forget to subscribe to my channel. And most importantly, please turn on the notification bell button so that you get notified whenever I upload any new videos on my channel. So now, without any further ado, let's get into the lecture. Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Before we begin to analyze the text, it's important to know about Virginia Woolf. And therefore, here I would provide you with a bit of introduction to her life. Virginia Woolf was born in a highly cultured and educated family in London. Her father, Sir Leslie Stephen, was a renowned critic, historian, scholar, and author of a large number of critical, biographical, and philosophical essays. Her father had cast an immense influence upon her. In fact, the atmosphere of the house also was intellectually stimulating to such an extent that she naturally developed an instinct for writing. Virginia Woolf was also a member of the Bloomsbury Group. She lost her mother when she was just 13. It was the first great loss of a very dear and near one that affected her deeply. In fact, she carried this trauma throughout her life. She was never able to overcome the sadness associated with her mother's death. Her father, Leslie Stephen, died in 1904, and it was after his death that Virginia Woolf, along with her sisters, moved to Bloomsbury Square, which later became famous as the locale of the Bloomsbury Group. She married Leonard Woolf in 1912, and it was soon after the marriage that she had published book reviews. She loved the city and the sea, but was also fascinated by books. Sadly enough, it was just 2 years after Virginia's marriage that the First World War broke out in 1914. Which ended an era of security and stability. And people in the West looked back upon it with nostalgia. Virginia Woolf was such a sensitive personality that she was overwhelmed with this unexpected shock and the horrible and nerve-shattering experience. She began to suffer from constant fits of depression. However, she was looked upon with great honor and admiration in the Bloomsbury Circle, and her association with this literary club meant a constant source of pleasure and inspiration for her. But when the Second World War broke out in 1939, she was very sadly disillusioned. It is this outbreak of the Second World War which destroyed her will to live. Though in the past she had suffered from fits of depression and illness, But this very strain probably proved too great for her to overcome. And this made her decide to put an end to her life forever. She sought her death in the river near her home and left forever. Let us have a look at Mrs. Dalloway. As the novel begins, we find Mrs. Dalloway reminiscing her past memories while visiting the market in order to buy flowers for her evening party. On this very day, she remembers Peter, his smile, his pocket knife, his eyes. She passes through the London streets and meets a number of people. She meets Hugh Whitbread, who informs her that he is going to see the doctor for his ill wife, Evelyn Whitbread. Then there was a violent explosion in a motor car, which also serves as an introduction to Septimus Warren Smith, who is a war veteran. Clarissa also watches him from inside the flower shop. As she moves from one jar of flowers to another, she hears a pistol shot, which was actually this backfiring of a motor car engine. And in this crowd, there are Septimus Warren Smith and his wife, Lucretia. Septimus is a haunted soul, and he is full of fear and apprehension. The world seems so painful and horrible to him that he doesn't know where to descend. He always feels that people are pointing towards him. This general effect of the war has turned him into a neurotic. Suddenly, there is the roar of an airplane, which leads to the miserable plight of Septimus and Lucretia. Though the sound of the airplane attracts the attention of the crowd, but it seems to Septimus that the airplane is trying to give him some kind of signal. It was an advertisement of toffee, which the airplane displayed in the sky with smoke, forming some letters in the sky by twisting and curling. Everyone looks up, and Lucretia tries a number of times to make Septimus take interest in this method of advertisement, but he seems to be engrossed in his own world and doesn't listen to her. Resia's condition appears to be very pathetic. She had left her home in Italy for Septimus, and now she is living among the strangers with her husband suffering from such behavioral problem. Mrs. Dalloway then recalls her memories with Sally Seton. Sally Seton. was someone with whom she had a very good friendship. The old memories come back to her after she returns home. She begins to ponder the contrast between the carefree life of Sally and that of her own. While thinking of her love, she is reminded of her old relation with this girlhood friend of hers, Sally Seton, who was exceptionally beautiful with dark, large eyes. In fact, she found her charm to be overpowering and magnetic. And then there is Peter Wald's sudden visit to Mrs. Dalloway's place after 5 years. As Clarissa combed her hair and took her dress, she found that there is a hole in it which needs to be mended. Therefore, she puts it for repairing on the sofa. And then the bell rings and Peter Walsh enters, fidgeting his pocket knife. Clarissa finds him the same as he was. After their formal conversation, they start recollecting their past. Peter Walsh is basically very sensitive and emotional. At present, he has come to England because he is going to marry Daisy, who is the wife of a major in Indian Army, and for whose divorce he has come to England. But something makes him realize that he has been a failure in life. Clarissa and Peter Walsh are found to have deep emotional attachments with each other, even after so many years. She thinks her decision of not marrying Peter Walsh was correct, because if she had married Peter, he would have never allowed her to have her own space. She would never have her own space. Instead, he would demand the whole of her. She also asks Peter to remember her party. And as Peter goes out, he starts thinking about the way Clarissa introduced her daughter, "My dear Elizabeth," which comes to him as a trouble. Reaching at Regent Park, he recalls his childhood. Peter fails to keep Clarissa away from his mind. He feels that Clarissa has grown hard, sentimental, and proud. He recalls that as a young girl, Clarissa was timid, and in the middle age, this timidity has become conventionality. Perhaps he annoyed her for being emotional and sentimental. Peter's attention diverts for a moment to the boys marching along in military uniform. However, in the Regent's Park, he gets a seat beside a grey nurse. and begins to recollect the summer at Boughton when he was deeply in love with Clarissa. Clarissa's behavior at that time was arrogant and prudish, which annoyed him very much. He remembers that evening when Richard Dalloway first came to Boughton, and he saw Clarissa talking to him. In fact, Peter asked Clarissa to make it clear whom she would marry, Richard Dalloway or Peter Walsh. And Clarissa had very coldly rejected his offer by saying, "It is no use, it is no use, this is the end." He went away that very night and never saw her again. Next we come to see Septimus's hallucinations. Frisia too is unhappy like Peter. She thinks that the world is the most wicked place because it is too painful for her, although she has done nothing wrong. Septimus is frequently suffering from mental derangement, receiving hallucinations of war of his friend who had died during the war. He fancies people talking behind the bedroom walls, and at times he sees things. And this has become the root cause of the terrible mental agony of Lucretia. We see that Septimus's condition gets more and more worse. He hears strange voices. He feels that he must tell his secret to the Prime Minister and the Cabinet. His secret knowledge is that the trees are alive, and in the world there is no crime and no love. Peter's sentiments are also reflected the way he talks to her when they meet after 5 years. And we find that Peter and Clarissa both are still deeply emotionally attached to each other. As far as Dr. William Bradshaw is concerned, he feels that Septimus needs treatment very badly. His condition is not very well. And therefore, he tells Lucretia that Septimus must be sent to the hospital. But Frisia is unable to accept this proposal and begins to dislike William Bradshaw because she feels that he wants to separate her from her husband, which is intolerable for her. And then there is the lunch at Lady Bruton's house, where we find Hugh Whitbread. Hugh is a man who is very conscious of his own importance. He has a little job at court, but he does it efficiently. He knows Lady Bruton for 20 years and always brings for her a bunch of flowers whenever he goes to lunch with her. But Lady Bruton prefers Richard Dalloway because he has been very kind to her in the past. She has invited him on this particular day to write an important letter. It is to be noted that at Lady Bruton's house, only Richard Dalloway is invited. And this very incident appears to be an omen to Clarissa Dalloway, because she feels that since she has grown old, her share of happiness has come to an end. She's no longer going to enjoy her life anymore. On his way of returning from Lady Button's house, suddenly Richard decides to get flowers for Clarissa because she likes it very much. There was a time when he was jealous of Peter, but now he feels reassured because Clarissa is weak and she wants support. He feels happy because his life is almost a miracle and an achievement. He feels well contented in front of Clarissa, confessing that she has done no wrong in marrying him. However, when he reaches home, he presents the flowers to her. It pleasantly surprises Clarissa, and she proceeds to express her troubles about Doris Gilman and her influence on Elizabeth. Mrs. Dalloway was taking rest when Elizabeth comes in. She is gentle, considerate, and full of the perfect sense of humor. Whereas Miss Gilman is a very clumsy, poor woman, and she lives by her tuitions. She has come here to take Elizabeth along, but feels greatly hurt because Mrs. Dalloway has laughed at her and ill-treated her. Sometimes Gilman thinks, why should she suffer when other women like Clarissa escapes from suffering? Only pleasure of eating is enjoyed by Doris Gilman. And then finally, we see the suicide of Septimus Warren Smith. Septimus, unable to conform to the expectations of the society, finally decides to end his life because he feels that this society will no longer accept him. And he finds this very society very unfamiliar because this was not the one he had seen before the war. And therefore, in order to get rid of the social expectations, in order to free himself to conform to the societal conventions, he decides to commit suicide. And then Peter Walsh receives a letter from Clarissa Dalloway and decides to attend her party. Clarissa has influenced him more than anybody in his life. He's given few letters by a young lady. One of them was from Clarissa, inviting him to the party. And then we see Clarissa's evening party, which is on, and guests are arriving there. She is busy in welcoming them with the common saying, "How delighted to see you." When Peter reaches there, Mrs. Dalloway's words seem to him very insincere. He begins to think that he has committed a mistake in attending the party. Seeing him, Clarissa at once realizes his troubled thought. Meanwhile, Lady Bruton comes in and Clarissa gets surprised to see uninvited Sally Seton in the party. William Bradshaw was also there in the party. Clarissa is continuously feeling the presence of Septimus Warren Smith through the conversation of Bradshaw's about him. She gets annoyed at the discussion of someone dead in her party because it's an accident that makes Clarissa always unhappy. She comes to know that Septimus had committed suicide by throwing himself down from the window. And the very mention of Septimus's death by Dr. William Bradshaw in her party makes her angry because she feels that it would destroy the spirit of her party. Clarissa Dalloway then begins to reflect on Septimus's honesty and moral integrity. She feels that at least Septimus has not compromised on anything wrong. He had the courage and honesty to end his life because he did not want to compromise with his moral integrity, which makes her respect Septimus as well. And this very incident makes her encounter the stark reality and the inevitability of death. And she feels that one cannot run away from the harsh realities of life. And in fact, instead of despairing, one should celebrate death. And with this realization, she gets back to her party again.